Man in the sleeping pod was suddenly awakened by an alarm. Before he could react to what happened, his body was wrapped layer by the AI, putting on a full spacesuit. Then he was ejected straight into space. When Jeff finally came to his senses, he realized the ship had been hit by something. There were other sleeping pods like his, all ejected into space, but some of them crashed during the ejection, while others like Jeff flew toward nearby planets for safety. But debris was scattered all over space. Many people were destroyed before they reached any planet. Luckily, Jeff's pod stayed stable. It pierced through the atmosphere and reached a nearby planet, but the high temperature damaged the pod, and the AI could no longer control the landing. Within seconds, the pod began to spin out of control. Seeing the ground just a few hundred meters away, Jeff could only open his mouth and brace for impact. Fortunately, the ground was covered with sand. Jeff survived the crash with no major injuries, but the environment of this planet was extremely harsh. Through the pod's glass window, he saw storms whipping up sand and rocks everywhere. Jeff knew he was in for a tough time here, so he quickly sent out a distress signal through the communicator. But after waiting for a long time, there was no response. Just then, the pod suddenly shook, and the system sounded an alarm. The hard landing had damaged the pod's structure. It could explode at any moment. Helplessly, he grabbed the window breaker and opened the pod's glass door. But just as Jeff was about to step out, another accident happened. The pod shook again, and his spacesuit got scratched on the way out. Now the oxygen was leaking from his abdomen. Soon the oxygen level dropped to 42%. Jeff quickly found the repair spray and used it to seal the damage. But even though it was fixed, half of his oxygen was already gone. Before he could catch his breath, the pod's engine started smoking. Jeff hurriedly crawled out of the pod. But now where should he go? Before he could figure it out, he saw the spaceship he was on had also landed on this planet. Jeff couldn't believe what he saw as the ship crashed onto the surface. A massive shockwave swept across. Luckily, he was far enough away, so he wasn't seriously hurt by the impact, but stranded on this desolate planet. Where could he go now? Just when Jeff was lost in thought, he noticed something flickering in the distance. With a try-it-out attitude, he headed toward it, but after only a few steps, he found a crash site, with another pod just like his, and even luckier. When he climbed inside, he found an oxygen unit, but when Jeff took it out, he realized it was completely broken. It seemed his only hope was still that flashing light, so he continued heading toward it, but Jeff didn't notice. There were strange claw marks on his pod. He dashed through the stormy desert, and soon reached the glowing spot. It turned out to be a distress signal made by a teammate. Jeff ran over quickly, telling him about his oxygen being down to 42%. The teammate seemed friendly, said they could share oxygen later, but he had something to finish first. While waiting, Jeff learned their crash wasn't just an accident. It was because the Space Corporation took a cheaper route to cut costs, and now the company had no idea about the crash. Even if they got the signal and sent rescue, it would take at least 18 months to reach this planet. The teammate went on. The ship wouldn't disintegrate easily. They could use its materials to survive. Hearing that gave Jeff hope. He quickly joined in to help, but the next second, a monster suddenly snatched the teammate away. Jeff hadn't even heard it. When he turned around, the teammate was gone. He thought the guy ran off, not wanting to share oxygen. So he decided to head toward the ship. Maybe there was oxygen equipment there, but walking across the huge planet was no easy task. As Jeff began to lose hope, a voice came through his helmet. A woman named Daisy, the ship's administrator. She said she was stuck inside her pod by a rock and needed Jeff's help. But when Jeff opened the map, he saw her pod was in the opposite direction of the ship. He panicked. If he went to save Daisy, his oxygen might not last. But Daisy said she had oxygen units there, enough for both of them to share. With no other choice, Jeff went to rescue her, but he hadn't gone far when darkness fell instantly, and he felt something was nearby. To save Daisy, Jeff forced himself to stay calm. Soon he noticed circular footprints on the ground, leading to a round cave. He didn't know what it was, so he backed away carefully. Then Daisy told him this planet might have some kind of creatures, and the weather was starting to change. Soft white fuzz was falling like snow. As Jeff observed, something flashed right in front of him. He quickly crouched down and turned off his light. He stared in that direction, but saw nothing. The uncertainty made his heart race. He grabbed a rock for defense. Just then a flare streaked across the air. Following its trail, a monster appeared. Jeff panicked and started running, but before he got far, the monster tackled him to the ground. When he stood up again, it charged straight at him. Jeff ran for his life, but the monster chased him relentlessly. In panic, he fell off a cliff. Luckily there was a slope below. He rolled down endlessly, and finally landed in the snow. He wasn't badly hurt, but his suit was damaged again from the fall. He tried to use the repair spray, but it was out of fuel. His oxygen was now only 25%. Just as Jeff fell into despair again, his teammate's voice came through the helmet. After an explanation, Jeff learned he hadn't run away, but was in greater danger. The monster had taken him to its nest. He begged Jeff to come rescue him. Jeff hesitated, but Daisy kept encouraging him, so he decided to go. After running for a while, he reached the monster's nest. There were tons of crashed pods here. Jeff moved among them carefully. He finally found the teammate, but the monster killed him instantly. Jeff quickly turned off his light and hid himself. When he looked again, the monster was heading toward him. He had no choice but to run, dodging between the pods. But when he looked back again, another monster was coming from the other side. Now he was trapped in between. Just then, the pod lights drew the monster's attention. They seemed attracted to them. Daisy, the administrator, had analyzed the creature's behavior through Jeff's report and remotely lit up all nearby pods, helping Jeff escape. But she forgot Jeff still had a light on his suit. That quickly drew another monster toward him. Jeff ran desperately through the darkness until he tripped in a smoky area. When he came to, he feared the monster was close, but surprisingly it didn't come near. It seemed afraid of something. They stared at each other for a while. Then the monster backed away. Jeff was confused, but he had to keep moving. After a few steps, he saw glowing bugs everywhere, like fireflies. He even thought they looked beautiful, but when one landed on his helmet, it suddenly turned red and became aggressive. Luckily his suit could handle it, but as Jeff moved forward, suddenly a massive sandworm swallowed him whole. That must be why the monster wouldn't enter this area, but it was too late to realize. The sandworm was devouring him. Soon he was gone underground. He quickly told the AI that his heart was failing. The suit activated the electric defibrillator. Sensing the shock inside, the sandworm vomited him out. Catching his breath, Jeff saw the sandworm was burrowing non-stop. He ran toward another cave, but when he tumbled in, he saw countless glowing bugs. They all turned red and began attacking his suit. After a struggle, he finally crawled out, barely escaping death. But from the intense movement, his oxygen was now down to 3%. He had to find Daisy fast. Luckily, he was now closer to her. Barely conscious, Jeff kept going. Before long, he found Daisy's pod. She kept her promise, linked her oxygen system with his, and gave him a repair spray to help. Together they pulled Daisy free. But just as they were about to leave, a noise came from behind. A swarm of monsters was closing in. They ran toward the wrecked ship, but the monsters were fast. Daisy used flares to confuse them, buying time to escape. Soon, they reached the ship's remains. As they stepped through the hatch, Daisy opened the system and shut the door just in time, stopping the monsters outside. They were both terrified. They planned to find a safe spot and check for supplies, but after a few steps, they saw blood all over the floor. When they looked up, there was another monster inside. They hid in the corner trembling, and when the monster moved away, they tried to sneak out, but then, out of nowhere, a monster crawled back through the pipes. They turned and ran, but after a few steps, they entered a metal room. It was the cargo bay, 10 meters above the ground, and the monster was right behind them. Just as it was about to pounce, the door jammed again. Daisy gritted her teeth and jumped down. Luckily both survived, but the monster was still chasing. Daisy dragged the oxygen unit, pulling Jeff along, but they couldn't just keep running. Even though the bay was full of cargo, the monster could still crawl on the walls. In a desperate moment, Jeff had an idea. He told Daisy to stall it and wait for his signal. Then he ran to the giant pod in the cargo hold. Using his climbing skills, he quickly got on top. He worked on the system, first turning off the lights to give Daisy a break, then verify his ID, and opened the pod's glass door. Meanwhile, Daisy lured the monster with her glowing suit. When the creature reached the target spot, Jeff calculated the drop time, plugged in the power, and launched the pod. Right beneath them, Daisy and the monster were fighting. Jeff was sweating from the tension. Then a heavy impact followed. And just like that, they managed to kill the monster. Thanks to the pod's protection, Jeff survived too. The two of them finally saw daylight again. They slowly walked toward the ship's window, but this disaster was far from over. Rescue would take at least 18 months. But would the corporation really send anyone?